agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda as listed.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, and the next item of business is approval of the minutes from March 11th, 2025. Anyone have any changes that have not yet been communicated?
Nope.
I'll entertain a motion.
I will motion to approve the minutes as written.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so we don't have a consent agenda, but we do have an administrative session.
And this is administrative due to the fact that the ordinance regulating off-street parking requires the planning commission specifically to approve whether they can do the parking agreement, so. Anyhow, this is for Cedar Fort Publishing, excuse me, is in the final stages of their third phase. With that third phase, it was planned on being warehouse. Warehouse parking is based on the one per employee. Parking stalls, excuse me, is based on one stall per employee on the largest shift. So they weren't when they built this, not perceiving that a use might come in that was a little more demanding, which recreation facilities are 1 per 250 of square floor area, which is unique in the fact that for this type of use, it's an indoor sand volleyball court. It's not like they're filling that whole space with people. It's very spread out. The courts take up quite a bunch of room. So we've looked at all of that, and
Is there room for like spectators? Is that gonna be something that might?
I'm
be
sure
there?
there's plenty of room. I think, does this one have a mezzanine? No, I don't know. Okay, so it's just.
How many parking spaces are there?
So on the analysis that we had in your report, so all three phases together, so there's almost 60,000 square feet. Most of that is, over half of that is warehouse, which is based on the one stall per employee on the largest shift, which the warehouses only have 6 employees total. So that's covered, and the office area is covered. The recreation requires 60 stalls. So they have a deficit of a little over 30 stalls. So they've agreed, because the peak times and the demands for the volleyball courts are in the evenings when the offices have now closed, and on weekends. So here's the gist of the parking agreement. Spaces shall be used on a first-come, first-served basis, except for any reserved or designated spaces as agreed by the parties. The hours of operation for each entity are as follows. You can see the offices are 8 to 5. Volleyball is 10 to midnight with peak usage after 5 p.m. and on weekends. And then no unattended parking will be permitted between 11:59 p.m. and 6 a.m. without the lacer's prior written approval. And I won't read the whole thing because the rest of it is all kind of more just legal language, but staff feels that covers any conflicts that could arise with the parking, and to have the agreement approved, then if there's any nuisances that come with the parking, we have that to fall back on.
So let me go back to that one if you
Sorry.
can. Yeah, I have a question. If you're ready for questions, or do we want?
Yeah.
So, it says that no unattended parking will be permitted without the prior written approval, so there is potential that they could leave cars in there off hours if, we're not saying there is no parking between 11:59 and 6 a.m., right?
No, the city wouldn't say that anywhere. So that's between two private parties.
I'm just wondering if we get vehicles that are parked in there, then we don't have, you know what I mean, we don't have adequate parking because there's other stuff in there like food trucks trucks or anything like that.
Essentially, this agreement would cover that, because then they'd have to have his approval. Once there's no parking and it becomes a problem, then we relook at it.
Yeah, right. Do we have to have language that will relook at it, or
We already
just?
do.
We already, okay.
We can revoke their business license. We can do a number of things.
Oh, they're building a facility though, right?
It's built,
It's built, it's all done.
pretty much.
So how are they permitted for it now, or?
It's a
how-
permitted use, so anytime a permitted use comes in, the first thing, like, they'll apply for a business license, and the first thing with the business license, we look to see if there's enough parking. Because we're not gonna allow something to go in a teeny little spot and no parking. The code allows for shared parking in these type of instances where you have multiple different type of users. And so we stand here today hoping you'll approve the agreement, so they can
Oh,
get their
I'm just
business license.
I'm just trying to understand how we get to where someone builds a facility and then they don't already have parking, and they're coming and asking us how to solve the problem. That's why I'm just kinda trying to understand that.
Is this a tenant improvement?
Well, yes,
So essentially, they built the shell,
yes, they built the
and then
shell,
they're coming in and occupying the
for-
shell.
a warehouse,
So that's how we got here.
Okay, so it was already, the facility was already built.
under
it's just a
construction for a
result.
warehouse, correct.
And the recreational facility is allowed by our code currently.
It is a permitted use.
Is there an issue where it says there shall be no overlap in parking demand between them? Because there is technically overlap in time, cause they start at 10 and the other, businesses are open from 8 to 5. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, is it a technicality that could cause issues?
I feel like it'll police itself. I mean, if there's nowhere to park, you're not gonna just sit there and, you know. I'm not worried on the amount of parking. I don't feel they'll need 60 stalls, period, but I don't think they'll reach that number.
So is there?
And if they do,
over-
it's probably on their peak hours, which doesn't affect the office hours.
So remind me what the businesses are that are next to it?
They're offices with warehouse components.
Do they have any comments, or is anyone talking?
There's an applicant here if you'd like to ask him questions
Once
directly.
we're done with questions for Planner Thompson, then we can.
Can help. The reason I ask about
Have them
whether it's
speak.
been built is because it's showing nothing, no building there in our packet.
Right, and in the
Yeah.
presentation, I actually drew it on there for you. And there's the actual site plan.
Okay, so how long's the facility been built like that?
It just barely got final. It's not even final. Yeah, I'm like, it's really close, but it's up.
Any other questions? Thank you, Laura. Okay.
Thank you, by the way.
You betcha.
Will the applicant, would you like to come up and speak? No. Does anyone have questions for the applicant?
I do, I'm just trying to understand. Yes, please, if you could. That'd be great, you just states his name.
Oh, sure. My name is Bryce Mortimer. I'm the owner of the facility in question in Springville.
Yeah, I've known him for a long time, you don't know.
Heather, do you need his address? Okay.
Great. So understand the process then, have you ever done this before, or do you have an idea what kind of people you're gonna have showing up? Are they holding tournaments, or you?
So I'm the owner of the property. The tenant is the one who's looking at coming in. I think we're going to be good because they're only looking at 4 spaces, for 4 courts, 4 volleyball courts. Each of the courts, when you're playing sand volleyball, only have 2 versus 2 or 4 versus 4. So there are really not a lot of people that are going to be involved. And then also in my business, Cedar Fort Publishing, I own that company and operate the business out of the building. And Tannis America, we only have about 12 cars between the 2 of our companies.
Oh.
So even when we're in full swing, full business, we've only got 12, maybe 15 at the max. And I started documenting it with pictures, trying to kind of see how full are we getting on this parking lot? And I think we're well underutilized.
Okay, sounds great.
Laura, if like a tenant changes or a use changes in that kind of thing, would that then cause this to come before us again?
Sure.
Okay.
That's why my question was, is that you didn't get surprised when you came to this, after you invested all this money.
No, we weren't going to be surprised. We knew, and just as I believe this is your name, Mr. Huffman, had mentioned that we built the shell, and I was expecting, as a landlord, to have a storage company come in, just like my second building there. And the zoning does allow for recreation. And so since I actually had two tenants that were both recreation, two letters of intent to use the space under recreation and not storage. So that was kind of a surprise to us. So we knew that we would have to come and make sure that we were following everything. And yes, so we knew that this is all contingent upon what we agree here tonight.
My kids played a lot of volleyball, so I've spent a lot of Saturdays watching tournaments, so that's why my only concern, and I guess we just have to address that down the road if that happens.
Yeah, I think so.
If it spills out onto the highway, then that will be really, obviously for everybody, so.
Right.
But it's great, you can utilize the land and.
Yes,
So,
yeah, it'll be good.
Laura, I'm sure you don't know off the top of your head, but the right-of-way width on that street road does allow for on-street parking and adequately adequately allowing the two lanes of travel. So in the off chance that you hire or double your occupancy in your office space or triple it,
Yeah.
and you're working weekends, there potentially is still overflow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, discussion?
I don't see any real issue, and I mean, knowing that this is just an agreement between parties that follows our zoning code, there's not much that we can speculate. It's a matter of approval of the.
We have to open this up for public comment.
No, this is administrative.
So.
Alright. Since we don't have to have a public hearing, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the shared parking agreement between uses on the same property at 2373 West, 700 South within the HC-Highway Commercial Zone.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So now we will move on. Yeah. So you're done. You're good.
Good luck.
So we'll move on to our legislative session. And the first item is Paul Washburn seeking a recommendation to amend section 11-6-130, parentheses 3, protection of creek corridors of Springville City Code.
Yeah, all right. It's the Laura show today, not the Carla show. Yeah, okay, so Wilford Clyde owns property south of the high school, adjacent to Hobble Creek. It's this piece right here. And he also lives there, but we won't do that. So currently, when developing adjacent the creek, any creek corridor, a 50-foot setback from the creek side edge is required. And within that setback, along and following our recreational trail general plan, master plan, a trail easement is also required. That's 10 feet, 20 feet wide, 10-foot trail, 2 5-foot sides. So this comes before you because they're requesting to amend our well, I can't say the street standard, the setback from the front yard to 20 feet, which would be a difference of 5 to 10 feet, and reduce the 8-foot park strip to 3 feet. to gather them additional depth to better lay out their proposed development.
That would include a street of some sort, right? Private drive or something? It doesn't, it looks like it's,
They'll show you
just
their
for-
layout, but
Oh.
we're not talking about the actual layout, but they're trying to get additional feet to better lay out lots. This is the proposed, didn't mean to go that far, but basically, planning staff has collaborated with the applicant over the last 5 years to discuss options for developing this property, including using the traditional neighborhood development overlay. The applicant and staff have not identified an option that produces the public benefit required by the TND overlay and is not acceptable to the applicant. Josh wrote that. That's why I'm asking questions, that's why I read it. Basically, this is the amendment. It's very short and simple. There wasn't much to it. But ending on where we require the trail easement, they just wanted to add developments required to provide a trail easement may reduce the landscape strip between the curb and the sidewalk to 3 feet and reduce the front setback to 20 feet. Our park strip requirements, trees are required in our park strips to shade sidewalks for pedestrians and to shade the street surface and help protect it from detrimental effects of direct sun and create comfortable microclimate in the right-of-way. Title IV of our street code requires planting of street trees will only occur in park strips that are 6 feet wide or wider. Areas with narrow park strips may not receive new street trees, and if they're removed, or the city can actually remove them if they're in a less than 6 foot park strip. And that's in the interest of public safety. And the benefits of park strips, we all know they're a good buffer zone from the right-of-way. They act as a visual and physical buffer between pedestrians and roadways, making it safer for people to walk. It's good traffic calming. The street trees help slow down traffic and create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. Water conservation, you can replace your turf grass with drought-tolerant plants in park strips and save significant amounts of water. And there's alternatives that they can be transformed into water-wise gardens using native plants and efficient irrigation methods. And it's also good stormwater management for permeable plant materials and mulch in park strips can allow rainwater and snow melt to seep into the ground. And on the lot configurations, currently in a front yard, we have 3 different setbacks, and it's based on your garage location. And that's due to not wanting a front-loaded garage to be the dominant feature on your house. So if you have a projecting front-loaded garage, your setback is 30 feet. If it's not projecting or is side-loaded, it's 25 feet. And then we also have one that currently is at 20 feet, but the parking has to be at least 20 feet behind the front wall plane. So we do have a 20-foot front setback that could be utilized with a design of a home to be as such. I don't know why we would want to reduce our front setbacks with the garages and just lose that whole reason why we have that. For the general plan, the transportation and circulation element goal says to provide and maintain a vibrant multimodal transportation network that encourages flow, safety, and consideration for the aesthetics of the community with the objective to develop and maintain a connected circulation system of streets, providing convenient access within Springville to neighboring communities and the larger region, and continue to utilize adopted street right-of-way standards to create safer new streets and sidewalks and as the standard for improving existing substandard rights-of-way. Oops, that was my left side. So staff is concerned about the imprecision of the proposed amendment's language and its potential effects. The proposed amendment would apply to any development required to provide a trail easement along a creek anywhere in the city. The language is not clear that it is referring to the street park strip, only a landscape strip. between the curb and the sidewalk. This could be construed to mean any landscape strip between a curb and a sidewalk. The proposed language could be read as permitting reduced park strip width and setback distance across the entire development, not just any lots abutting the creek corridor. So the amendment is unclear in how, or on how changing conditions make the proposed amendment necessary. There are development possibility options that can be used, such as applying for the T&D development, which is used to accommodate the development of traditional neighborhoods through the adoption of form-based code regulating plans, lot types, and other associated regulations. And staff does not support the proposed amendment, or amendment as proposed. And I'll end there for questions.
So is the big challenge that staff has with it is that it's not clear, or?
That's one of the reasons, yes.
I guess I'm curious to hear what the applicant has to say in terms of how, I guess, where the amendment's coming from, as well as, I mean, there are implications. I can see how it will affect the general code across the board.
Do you want to
Yeah.
pull them up and?
I guess, and my other question, as far as when discussions have happened with staff, how much back and forth has there been? I'm from what I'm reading and what I hear is, there is a desire not to do the traditional overlay, neighborhood overlay.
I will have to relay to Josh, who is not here, he's in the meeting next door, but he's been in those discussions, mainly not I, so.
Okay.
So we don't know what the concerns are with the traditional neighborhood overlay?
You'll have to ask them directly.
No problem.
Okay.
Appreciate you batting for him, so. Can you bring that back and zoom out?
Bring what?
The city, let's look at the creek.
Oh, you want the map on? This is my presentation, so I can't really zoom out. But if it's at a good enough distance,
The high school is just barely north.
yeah.
Yeah, I know where it's at. I'm just curious of how much of the creek is left for, this is just a section.
They actually have a presentation or a slide to show you if you want to maybe get a better understanding from the applicant.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for Laura?
I guess before you close that, as far as,
Hold on.
with the street section that they're proposing to amend, would we be essentially be creating a new standard detail within our street sections to make this amendment? Or would this only apply to the river protection corridor?
It's a good question because the street standards are adopted through the engineering department with their standards and specs.
Right.
So, to me, I look at this as, that's another problem with language. So is it amending the street standard or is it a variance? Because there's also variance, ways you can change a street standard through the city engineer.
Oh, here comes John.
And that's where, I guess, one of the concerns that I would have is modifying or creating an additional standard detail within the city that potentially be used elsewhere that we don't necessarily want elsewhere, especially as a 3-foot park strip.
Right.
And also being concerned with, like, if we do have, if we are going to make an amendment to a park strip or a street section, is there one that's more adequate that may fit the appropriate approach that they're trying to do? Hi, Josh.
Hi,
We're
Josh.
gonna ask you some questions now.
Yeah, would you mind coming up and, we kind of have some questions about the discussions that have happened regarding this before? I don't know, you can say
You got a
sitting
mic
if you
down
feel
there,
like.
right?
Yeah.
I think you're good.
I think, yeah.
Sorry, you're no man's land up there, so.
So I guess, one of the questions that we had was with this particular conversation and why it's being brought before us now is what discussions have happened in terms of why the traditional neighborhood overlay is not desired. We still have to hear from the applicant, I understand that, but also from staff's point of view, how that can potentially affect the conversations moving forward. If we were to make a decision, we decide to discuss it more or pass it back into staff's hands, like what that looks like, there's a lot of kind of gray.
Do you want to hear from the applicant first, or do you want to hear from me first?
Yeah, let's I don't know.
I got a question. Do we have a standard that does not have a time?
No.
Everything now has.
Yes. Correct.
In the entire
Yes.
city?
Correct. For 20 plus years.
Okay. 'Cause there's a lot of, I live in the neighborhood.
There are a lot of neighborhoods that predate the adoption of these new street standards.
Standards. Okay.
Correct.
I guess we'll hear from the applicant first and then ask you the hard questions.
Okay, however you'd like to take it. Sorry I was late.
No problem.
Parboard was parboarding.
Would the applicant like to come up and,
Thank you for taking some time to consider this. Genevieve, I'm surprised you're still on the planning commission. You've been on here for a long time, haven't you?
Last year, this is my last year.
Didn't I appoint you to the planning commission way back when?
Yep, way back when.
Well, thanks for your service. Having sat on that side a few years myself, I know that it takes a lot of time and effort, and a lot of times people in the community don't appreciate all the time and effort that a lot of our volunteers do. But it's also fun to be involved in the community and what's going on, and I had a chance twice. Once I was on the city council when Mayor Packard and I were just kids. We were on the city council together back in the late 80s, early 90s, and then a chance to be the mayor. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us in that. One of the challenges we have in the community is that we have these infill pieces of property around the city, and we've set zoning standards in certain parts of town, which is, it's a good practice, and but the town has been built up around some of these little infill areas, and so it becomes kind of difficult to all of a sudden apply the zoning in some of these areas because they're odd-shaped pieces, they're small pieces, they don't fit quite right, and that kind of thing. And this particular piece, can you go back to that map? Thanks, Laura. So this particular piece, has some of those challenges, and I've been meeting and working with Josh for, been talking for a year and a half or 2 years, haven't we? He's been very good to sit down and talk with me about different ideas and that. And one of the things you asked about is this overlay that you have. Well, we've tried to come up with something there, and Josh has always told me, well, we have to give something back to the city. So I've offered some ideas of what to give back to the city to do something different. In fact, I hired a planner to come in that had worked on, I think he worked on that development across from the elementary school down here, right?
Tom Lowe,
Yeah, Tom Lowe. Yeah. You know Tom?
just met him once.
Oh, yeah. So I paid Tom to come in, and he sat down, and we actually got some people that were interested in buying lots there, some young families. And Josh spent some time with us, and he drew up a lot of different ideas. One of the challenges is all the ideas he grew up with provided the Staley property, which is just above this property on the west side there, and I haven't been able to purchase that property. So because it's such a small piece, it's a little limited on what you can do in that. But some of those proposals, we weren't even talking about putting any curb and gutter, any sidewalk in, and which Josh was pretty open to in that at the time. I'm not sure he was willing to approve it, but he was open to consider it. And we talked about what would be the give back to the city. And one of the things I offered was the idea of of providing way on the east end here, some way to access the creek. So if we had a problem in the creek, even though it's not necessarily the city's responsibility to do flood control in the creek and that's more of a county issue. But I can guarantee you, if you have trees that have fallen down in the creek and it's flooding your community, by dang, you're going to get involved with it and that. So one of the ideas was to give some kind of an access to the creek that the public could get there, like if fishermen wanted to go down and fish along the creek there or whatever, they could do that. But we could never seem to make anything work. So I kind of tried to go back to a more traditional meet the zoning. And that one of the challenges is we're required to do a 50-foot setback from the edge of the bank. So the property line goes to where those white lines are, those other lots in Harbor Creek Estates. And by the time you figure part of the creek, and then you do to the bank, and then you do 50-foot setback, all of a sudden you don't have a building. You don't have a building area big enough to build the house on. It's very tight. So I've asked Paul to help me. He's been doing entitlement for a business for many, many years. And he came up with this idea, and I'll let him explain it and talk about the pros and the cons of it and that. He can handle some of the questions that you've had. But I thought it was a pretty ingenious way to do it without having to go through and change all the zoning and everything in the community, because this would affect so few. If you look from Community Park clear to Bartholomew Park, this could be, in my mind, it's probably one of the very few places along the creek that this would even apply to, because everything's pretty well developed, and anything west of Community Park is probably going to be more industrial type area than that anyway. So we thought it was a really good solution. So I'm going to turn the time over to Paul and let him talk a little bit on the merits of it and what we're trying to accomplish. Thanks. One of the things I think we need to do as a city, though, is that we need to have an infill ordinance, and a lot of cities have this, that allow us to have some modifications, because you can't, it doesn't always just fit the zone. If you have like a big piece of land and you can square it all up and put the lots and fixture the roads and all that, that works fine. But when you have little small pieces, you have to do some modifications to make it work sometimes, and that's what I'm asking you to do.
How do I get the plan up here, Laura? You're smarter than I am. There we go. Okay. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Again, my name is Paul Washburn, and as Wilford mentioned, I've been doing this for a number of years, and both privately and then with Wilford as well. This property, it's a unique piece of property, and it comes with a number of challenges. Wilford talked about one, just the configuration, the size of it, the narrowness of the property. I've got a map I'd like to give you. I tried to get to scan this, and I couldn't get it to scan. So, if you'll forgive me for this, but
Thank you.
and you probably have to scroll to see it too. Apologize for that. Talk about some of the issues here. As you look at that map, you see the property line across.
I'm gonna text you a picture.
Okay, you'll notice a property line off the backyard lines of the previously developed subdivision. And then we have a blue line, light blue line, that's the edge of the high bank. And that's where we get to start counting the 50 feet from. The dotted line at the top is the 50-foot setback. And you can see it really compromises the ability to develop the lot. Makes some very small building envelopes. If that was the only problem, you know, I guess we'd probably try and figure out ways to deal with it. But the other is we have some topographical issues. This is a creek bed and the ground slopes. The other problem we've got is Mr. Clyde would like to preserve as many of the trees on the property as can possibly be done. And we've gone out and surveyed those to find locations of them. We're gonna try and plant houses around those trees whenever possible so that we don't do away with the old growth that we have. Ultimately, if there's ever a trail developed there, that will enhance that area for the citizens. And I'd like to be able to make it so that people who buy lots there have as much flexibility as they can. Our intention was not to try and change the zone for the whole city. We added it strictly to the, no, to the protection corridor. I don't think this would apply anywhere else in the city. It's just strictly for the protection corridor. And as Wilfred mentioned, there's not much left of that corridor that can be developed. Those areas have been developed well in the past, and very limited area that can work. One of the concerns that was mentioned by Laura is traffic control and traffic calming. I think if you look at this, you've got a cul-de-sac that's less than 400 feet long. That's pretty much a traffic calming device all of its own. The road, because of the topography, is not going to extend anywhere else. Another constraint we've had is trying to configure this road so at some point in time, should the Staleys decide to develop their property, they have the opportunity to do that. Wilford's trying to be a good neighbor and do things the way they should be. So adding all of those elements together, we think having the flexibility to not necessarily force a 20-foot setback or a 3-foot park strip, but have the ability that they may do it should the design of the home require that to be able to function well. So if you've got any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, or
What's the current zoning?
R10,
R10?
Yeah.
What's the minimum lot size on our R10 lots?
10,000 feet.
Well, as far as frontage, though. 80?
The square feet that are listed for each lot, is that including the easement, or is that the portion?
That includes the creek, that includes the
Includes everything.
But one of the things is, you can see these building pads here, this is the buildable area.
Mm-hmm.
What we did is we took the 5 feet out of each side of that. I don't think you want an 8-foot planter there and a 3-foot planter there. And we put that whole 10 feet so that we can have a buildable area here for these houses. And so these lots were okay, they had an ample building area. And so if you have to put an 8-foot planter, then you've got to take 10 feet off this buildable area, particularly this lot 5. In this area here, because, this is where the creek turns. So the creek bed's down in here, at the edge of the creek bed, it comes clear up into the property, so it really narrows this down right here. Makes it really difficult. But, believe me, I've worked on this for a year and a half, just trying to figure out how to make that work. And
So this,
I've built 2 houses in Springville my lifetime. Both of them had 3-foot planters. You don't put trees in the 3-foot planters, but I live in the cul-de-sac, how Laura pointed out. It's just backs up to this. And we all have trees in our front yards, but we set them out back behind the sidewalk and it works just fine. I think one of the challenges that we've got to look at as a city, not just on this property, but on all properties, is housing affordability is a real, and I'm not talking about this property, I'm just talking about the city in general. Housing affordability is a real problem. And a lot of the young kids can't afford to get into a house. And if we require 8-foot planters, I know it sounds really nice to have an 8-foot planter, have a big tree-lined street and everything, but if we require 8-foot planters on every street of all the new development in our community, which is what we're requiring right now, you think about how costly lots are, and you take young kids, do they want an 8-foot planter out there, a sidewalk, a 25-foot front yard, and then no backyard, because they can't afford it? I think most people would say, I'd rather have a 3-foot planter, which accomplishes separation from the road. It allows you to be able to get your driveway from the gutter up to the sidewalk. I hate combination curb and gutter like is in Ralph's neighborhood, because every time you come to a driveway, the sidewalk dips down like that, comes back up. All the post office boxes have to be attached to the sidewalk, which is another hazard in that. But with a 3-foot planter, you still have the separation for pedestrians. The only problem is that you have to plant trees behind the sidewalk instead of in the plant. And I've lived in 2 neighborhoods, and it's worked really great. And if you drove into both neighborhoods, there's all kinds of trees in the fronts of those yards, and it's very nice in that. And you know, the city has on 3-foot planters. They just have to police it. And if somebody plants a tree in a 3-foot planter, you have to go tell them take it out. But I just think for us to say that we're going to put 8-foot planters everywhere in this community, I just think and this isn't an issue here. What we're trying to do is get it so that we can have a buildable area on these lots, and that's why we're going with the 3-foot planter, because these are nice lots. You know, the people that buy these lots can afford to have an 8-foot planter there, but we're trying to get a buildable area there.
So,
I tried to do the overlay, but I could never work anything out with Josh to do the overlay. And he's tried to. I'm not putting it down on Josh. I was actually quite surprised. Paul submitted this. We were out of town. I was quite surprised when the staff said that they wouldn't support this. I thought this was a pretty good solution without having to change all the zoning code in the town, and it affects almost no other zoning, because there's very few lots that are even available in Springville that front a creek. And so it was an easy way to take care of an issue there that we need to. And somehow we've got to figure out how to have some flexibility in these infill areas in our community.
so is this map with,
Those are with the 3-foot plan.
that's with the 3-foot
Isn't it?
and the,
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that is,
yes.
we've had the engineer draw a 3-foot plan so you can see what
Yeah.
it's like.
So there's a difference between the one on the screen and the one you handed us? Are those both the same setbacks and
They have
everything?
the same setbacks. One has an additional lot on it. All of this is still in concept, trying to find out what we can do with the amendment to the zone.
So it just has a few less lots.
I think that's what you're trying.
Yeah.
I've got to stack that beef that isn't owned that.
Yeah.
Make it still be a nice neighborhood, a nice area. When I bought the land, I didn't really want to develop it, but I've got a daughter that wants to build a house. So I'm trying to put some lots in there and get some young people in our neighborhood, so us old people have somebody to take care of us when we get old. And we're getting there real fast. There are a lot of nice young people on that street.
The language that we used to amend the zone, I thought was relatively clear. Certainly would be willing to sit with staff if they want to make some adjustments to that. But again, we felt like it really, the very few places this could apply to in the city, anywhere that's left, I think may even have bigger challenges than this property has.
so you would be open to continuing this to give you a chance to work on that with staff?
I think we could live with that.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I don't really have any questions. I maybe some for Josh when we get to that point, but
Mm-hmm.
that's all I have.
As far as, not this, the hard thing with this, and this is just more while you're still up here as the applicant, is that as part of the planning commission, we're supposed to take the non-biased legislative viewpoint,
That's right.
regardless of what is happening on the specific parcel. And so with the questions that staff has raised, I guess our concerns, or what I kind of throw back in your court, is with the iteration presented, is that we, though it is seldom that it may happen again, we don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, is there a particular yield or goal that you're aiming for that?
I think
On
what
this-
we're looking for is we want to have buildable lots, something that's, somebody can come in and have some ability to position things on their lot.
And I just have to say, I live in the historic district, so my lot would fit inside one of these lots.
Yeah.
In the buildable area. So what does buildable lot mean to you?
Well, I
What's
l-
the depth of the lot? The depth of the, you take that 10 feet out of there, then it's very
It's
narrow.
only,
And that's part of the question, though, I think that Genevieve is bringing up, is that
So yeah, it's.
the buildable is subjective at this point.
It's
Well-
73, 75,
and 40 in a place.
40
Yeah,
on
it's
one
40
I think-
side.
at a pinch point.
In order to answer that, I think
But that's 140 something
Wide.
wide, yeah.
right,
Plenty wide, plenty wide.
plenty wide, there's no problem with the width.
It's the depth.
But thing we want to be able to do, again, we're trying to preserve trees that are on the lot, all of the other things, and try and take care of some topographical features with the property. The other element here is, I don't know that it means that the entire house would be set back 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk. It may be the chimney, it may be architectural features. We really built some nice-looking houses now. When I grew up in Utah, standard house was 25 feet deep. Generation before that, the ones that built in the 40s, were generally even smaller than that. You know, housing has evolved, and this is a nice area, and we'd like to be able to encourage as nice a homes as, you know, can be provided for Springville.
well,
And-
I think the one thing about this property is it's unique because there's not very much frontage on the creek.
Right.
Bottom line is, and preserving an opportunity for an investor or a person that owns the property to provide, you know, we can build smaller homes on it, but then you not, the cost of the land just precludes the ability to that. And I don't know, guess maybe I'm the dissenter on the 10-foot or the planter strips. My daughter's built over in Spanish Fork, and they have the planter strips too, but they've all turned into gravel pits because the Central Utah Conservancy District will pay them to flip the strip, is what they call it. And so then it'll eat up snow blowers, so you end up with gravel. So to me, it's not really a very appealable if you've got 10 feet of gravel strip on it. That's just my take on it. I think that maybe feel different if it was like we were putting a road up the side of the creek, which we don't want to do, you can't do. And we've got, you know what I'm saying, you don't really have the buildable area that you're gonna do there. Where this is a cul-de-sac, and we're not talking tunnel of trees here, we're talking, you know, a few 100 feet before you stop and come back out of this. And I'm probably a little tainted, I have to reveal that I actually tried to buy the property
Okay.
west of this, where, you know, right across the street. And the city had approved 3 building lots in that, and, but it had delayed, and, so it fell out of favor, and when it came back, then the city didn't approve that, reapprove that plat. So we had 3 really nice homes that we could put in there that were more affordable, but it ended up being a huge lot with just, you know, multi-million-dollar homes. So again, we were trying to do that same thing you're talking about, is
Yeah.
to try to create an opportunity. So I think that it's a reasonable, you know, approach to have, you know, you still have a planter strip, you still have the ability to do it, because that 50 feet, I know this property personally, so just so you know, full disclosure, I agree with you, or we have to kind of just approach it. Josh, is there a way that we can write this somehow that only applies to this area? Because, I mean, we do have unique places in the city, and we have made adjustments for some of them because there have been times that as a developer, I've tried to buy property that didn't have enough frontage or things like that, and then people were like, oh, won't pass and then like 3 years later, I drive by and some accommodation has been made and something has happened. So I think it will be a great asset to the community, but is there some way that we can just say in this area, because of these circumstances, that we can do that? Is that a variance, or
You
what is
can
that?
do whatever you want, and there's a number of ways to do what you would want, depending.
I'm just
the-
trying to find a way to put wheels on it so that we're not changing the whole city, but we're also allowing for this
And
particular property.
And I can talk to that a little bit. I mean, a lot, actually. I mean, my primary question is, what are you trying to accommodate to happen here? Because these lots, even with the 10 feet out of them, would all be large enough to put a nice home on. And the question is, how much or to what degree do we want to accommodate a desire to yield more or maximum large lot home development here at what would objectively be a sacrifice to the quality of the public realm?
Well,
And I have a hard time, from a planner perspective, making that argument.
and I guess as a follow-up question to that, like I know in the traditional neighborhood overlay, like you are allowed to encroach chimneys, porches, architectural elements into that front setback. So that's where, if that is allowed in a certain portion of our current city code, I think that should be explored more, if that's the concern. And if not, and that's part of my question. And that's part of my question is as presented currently on the screen, would this be amendable to be able to fit within the traditional neighborhood overlay?
No. Not this plan. This plan doesn't meet the intent of the traditional neighborhood plan. It doesn't deliver any reciprocal public good.
What do you-
Except that they are losing from the midpoint of the stream to the high bank is anywhere from 20 to 40 feet, and then an additional 50 feet. I live in a nice house, but I tell you, if you took 50 feet from my back fence line, I would have a living room and nothing else. Might have a single-car garage. I don't know what your situation is, but that's a big give, and it's going to the community. It's not something that is for them. I mean, I'm sure if the city decided they don't want to have setbacks and stuff, Wilford would be really happy about that, but there is a big give here. I mean, by the time you get done adding all that together, it's, you know, close to 20% of the property.
I
What is the city losing by making that a 3-foot line?
I don't want to engage in direct back and forth conversation with the applicant. It's really not the venue for that. So I'm happy to spend some time kind of talking through with the commission our rationale and our thoughts about it. And I have, obviously things to say, but I would recommend that before I do that, we
Yeah.
open the public hearing and then move to planning commission discussion. Then you can ask me to talk if you'd like.
Any other questions for the applicant, Jason?
I have a quick question, so I have two plans in front of me. Which one would meet the new statute, what one doesn't? Are they both? Do they either one of them
They
have?
both could be adapted to work. Again, this is kind of a plan in progress. It's gonna be hard for us to finalize the final plan until we know what we're dealing with. So,
I'm just trying to understand, does it have the 10-foot, does either one of these have the 10-foot in it?
I think no, it's just the opposite. No, you're right.
Hunter, I have one question when you get a chance. So,
We can hear you, so go. I think we're ready to hear your question.
I guess my main question is, what is existing in the current area right now? Are there other homes with a 3-foot setback? What does it look like around the area?
Well, the city just put a sidewalk and paid for it along 12 East there, and they put a combination curb and gutter sidewalk.
The neighborhood
So
that's
I
in,
don't know why they did that.
yeah, the neighborhood that's to the east, the area where Mr. Clyde lives, is all 3-foot.
Oh, no.
Combination too.
Yeah,
Well,
in
yeah, mine's
combination.
combination. Mine is further east of that.
There's
And the entire
combination.
subdivision has which, I'll be honest with you, I wish I had a 3-foot because my mailbox gets ravaged once in a while, okay? But at the same time, I'm not a big fan of the 10-foot just because as a builder, it does eat a lot, and it's a lot of, it's turning into a lot of where they're putting a lot of gravel in there, and the kids, it just gets gravel everywhere. I'm not real big fan of that, so.
So to answer
That's my
your
personal
question,
opinion.
Tyler, it's all over the place.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. But I guess the heart of my question kind of is what Ralph said, and that is like, how many people in that area would rather have had or had the opportunity or the option, and yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm. Just one thought.
This question is, there's no 8-foot planters in that whole area.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't even
Okay. Thank you.
We keep talking about 10 feet, but is it, I don't know what is that 10 feet? We're talking about an 8-foot strip.
It's an 8-foot strip being reduced to 3, but it takes 10 feet of right-of-way away from the overall right-of-way of the road.
Right.
Because we're
So
taking 5 feet from
on
each side.
Oh,
of
from
the
each
street.
side of the
So
street,
what
okay.
we did is we moved the street over so that the whole 10 feet would come on the creekside lots, because that's where the buildable area is in question. And, one of the big areas, it's like, right in this area, yeah, you can build a house over here, but you can't build a house over here. Because all of a sudden, it's like 20 feet wide, And if you want to build a 20-foot wide house, but I don't know how many 15,000 square foot lots have 20-foot wide houses on them.
And just to Jeremy's question before I forget, the newest subdivision in that area directly to the south on 1150 East does meet the current street standards and was developed under the 29-foot of asphalt, 57-foot local with an 8-foot park strip. Just 2 streets to the south.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Paul and Winford. And let's open the public hearing.
Were you gonna state and talk about it anymore?
He's gonna talk about it after the public hearing.
I don't see anybody approach, so I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I took some notes, and if there's something specific you'd like me to hit, and I don't, I will. I did not stay totally in order of topic. But first, I definitely want to thank Wilford for taking the time and effort to explore this, and bringing in a planner to evaluate options. It's been I've really appreciated the opportunity, one, to get to know Wilford and just engage in the process. There's been some discussions about, I don't think this would apply very many places. It's actually a lot more than you think, because it doesn't just apply to Hobble Creek, it applies to Spring Creek, to Dry Creek, to any of the other creeks. So all of the area of Dry Creek that runs through the former Crandall and Minor property to the west of SR 51, north of 1600 South, all that would be applicable to this. All of the area where Spring Creek north of 400 South on the west side of town, west side of 2600 West, where Spring Creek runs through that area. That would all be subject to the, no, I mean, it's not Spring Creek, sorry, Dry Creek would be subject to this. Any development on Spring Creek would also be subject to this, and we've kind of dealt with this with that last little piece that developed where the soda shop and the coffee shop are on north of 9th, just south of Spring Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah, 960 North. And then, obviously, all of the area in between, at least on the north side of Hollow Creek, between 4th West and the freeway. And then on the south side of that, kind of west of the wildlife reclamation area that they did in south of Community Park. So there's a good chunk of area that this would be applicable to.
Is this applied, I'm sorry, real quick question, so I'm just kind of thinking my way through those places you thought about. Down there by DWR, they build a little development down there by the storage area,
Right, that new,
the new
yeah.
one. Does it have the 10-foot, or the 8-foot planter strip?
Yes. To modify the point about it may apply to a lot of areas, my goal through the general plan is to get to a point where we protect these corridors to the point where we're not actually backing development onto them at all, like period, ever again. So hopefully it won't be as big of an issue moving forward. There are a number of other options here that could definitely work. I think rezoning the parcel itself to an existing zone. I know the concern has primarily been lot depth, but sometimes when you buy odd-shaped pieces of property or inefficient pieces of property, your lot yield is a little inefficient, and maybe you can't get all the lots you want at the depth you want, but you can get the lots you want at a slightly reduced depth. The road doesn't have to go in the middle. This doesn't have to be double loaded. I know that yields the most lots, but if you put the road on the south, which has probably been Wilfred and I's primary point of separation, is that I was basically willing to recommend to the Planning Commission to do anything they wanted if we could get the road along the creek with the half of the road next to the parkway along the creek, so the creek was open to the public. But that obviously compromises the interest, Wolford's interest and property owner's interest to have creek frontage in their backyard. From the big picture, I think every time we've done that was a miss in the city. Like, we should all the way up through the river bottoms. None of those houses should have backed on the creek. The creek should be a publicly accessible public amenity and shouldn't be privatized. Some people feel different, but generally you'll accrue a lot more benefit to the community to have a creek that is open and accessible to everyone than you will have it in people's backyards. It's just the benefit accrues to different parties. So we're definitely willing to evaluate changing the zoning, making alterations to the zoning, but in this case, I think the primary public good, at least in the traditional neighborhood development zone, that could be exchanged would be that enhanced public access and frontage openness of the creek. There's a lot of other things we can do on the lots. I frankly would be fine with a 10-foot setback as long as we kept the garage back far enough for these houses so that the garage wasn't the predominant feature of the front of the house. There's a lot of things that I'd absolutely support that wouldn't sacrifice an important part of the public realm. Now, as Wilfred mentioned, when we had Tom here looking at things, we were looking at potential for other types of cross-sections, streets that don't have curbs and gutters. Hunter's more familiar with with these type of things. There's a new urbanist community called Habersham that has, well, a lot of new urbanist communities going all the way back to Seaside don't have curb and gutters and sidewalks and those kind of formal divided street sections. They're small widths of asphalt. They're very informal. Those can work too, but that would require changing the rest of the street section. We wouldn't want 29 feet of asphalt on that kind of street section. And what some of Tom's options did was introduce that kind of street to create a more informal green setting where the street was less delineated and there was more of kind of central commons feel. And there definitely was a miss by including including that little triangle of property that Wolford doesn't control, which made some of the plans less useful. But I also heard, at least in the limited feedback I heard from some of the people that were looking at the lots, is that kind of wasn't the lot they were looking for. They were more looking for kind of the traditional suburban large lot development with the majority of the yard in the backyard, and that kind of more of a outward facing kind of communal space wasn't as desirable. So it might have been a mismatch between the options that newer planning paradigms gives us and what the audience for these lots really wants. And that is really a large lot with a large home, and to be able to double load a street like that, obviously you run into some geometric issues. But this is not a small site. If Hunter and I were on this, as little incremental developers, we could do a ton with it, but we wouldn't be doing the same thing. So there's still a lot of options here. Just the large lot, deep lot, single family lots, you can only get so many. With the cul-de-sac, I'm actually not convinced that a cul-de-sac would be permitted in this case. Generally, the cul-de-sacs are not permitted in the city unless it is absolutely the only way to develop the property. I think more likely we would end up with a temporary turnaround for a street that would continue east to the street farther to the east, and that may be a 50-year time frame when, hopefully Wolford's still around in 50 years, but maybe not. And the kids want to do something different with that property, but we'd probably want to preserve the option of that road continuing through and not terminate it in a lot. So we could actually perhaps be more efficient with the lots, at least on the north, by not having a cul-de-sac and doing some type of hammerhead or some type of temporary turnaround there instead of a cul-de-sac, because I will absolutely agree that the cul-de-sacs are ginormously way too huge. And but don't tell Jeff and Brad that I said that. Then on the 50 feet, the 50 feet isn't a give to the public, it's just a setback to buildings. There is a trail easement. The trail easement is not 50 feet. And to Ralph's concern on the park strip with the gravel, totally agree. If you walk down to Pier 49 Pizza, they try to put gravel in their park strip, which is kind of humped and sloped, and it's on the sidewalk and it's in the gutter. But Springville actually doesn't permit that. You have to have a certain percentage of living plant material in your park strip. So if you do a gravel mulch or a wood mulch, you still have to have 70% of living plant material. And
Does the state overrode that? I know this is.
no, the state is totally fine with that because that living plant material is can be low water, drip irrigated. It doesn't have to be sod. It could be sedum if you wanted to, which doesn't require any supplementary water. It just has to be something alive, and there's plenty of plants in our local palette that fit that bill. So yeah, we've had a lot of conversations around this, and without any acrimony or any like ill feeling, it's just very, very difficult from my perspective to make a positive recommendation to diminish the quality of the public realm in such a way that the benefit solely accrues to large lot single family development, so that somebody can have a bigger house on a 10,000 square foot lot or a 16,000 square foot lot. That's not because I don't like big lots or I don't want people to have nice houses. If somebody else came to me and said, what is the calculus that, like, say, if Genevieve or Ralph or Hunter came to me and said, what good did this do to the city or give to me? I don't know that I could make a good argument there, and I'm willing to hear those good arguments. But yeah, we're just struggling to see how diminishing the park strip to accommodate an ideal lot layout here is a convincing argument to change the code. There's a lot of other things I'd be happy to do other than this.
Well, that's part of the concern, like quickly looking at the maps that we have in our general plan, the even neighboring properties. I very quickly towards Bartholomew Park was able to identify 4 other large parcels similar to this that abut the creek that would potentially have a street frontage to or something along the creek that again looking at it from just a completely objective view of the legislation that we currently have, it would at the current time with the way it's currently written not meet the intent of our current general plan or be able to be easily modified in the future. And the other concern is one that I raised with Laura was how this affects our standard details in our sections in terms of if this is going to move forward through engineering and development, that's a different detail that would then need to be applied for a variance, and there's other things there. And not to say I think the intent is right. I also looking and being familiar with our general plan housing initiatives and what we're trying to do as a city to provide housing. I agree 100% with you, Wilford, that it's an issue that we're trying to address as a state. But currently, as presented, it just doesn't meet the current intent of what our code is laying out. And so I would want it to go forward, to move forward, to talk more with the city, and it sounds like that's more, it may be a little bit more of an abrasive conversation, but in part of that, with that, I know the traditional neighborhood development overlay requires that the developer turn over park space, essentially open space, something to the city. Is there currently a minimum requirement for that amount in that overlay?
No, maybe I could pull up the code just so everyone kind of has a context of what, how the code actually reads. And I don't think it would be an abrasive conversation if we keep having the conversation. I mean,
Abrasive is probably the wrong word.
I mean, we could continue to discuss one point of context that we actually really missed in the staff report, and what we've presented to you now is that Public Works doesn't support this pretty categorically. So it would be hard. It's hard for us to, even if we supported this, to make a recommendation to on something that Public Works, who is really the steward of the street sections, doesn't support.
Public Works it's the park strip width that
Correct.
they're concerned?
Because that's where their meters are located and they want more room?
Because they also have a firm belief in the urban design mandate of having an 8-foot park strip with
So,
Do we have
trees
any
and,
areas that allow the 6 foot park strip either?
no, and even,
You just allowed a 5-foot park strip on 900 east
um,
on the Hatfield property. Explain that to me.
I could. It's a long explanation, but so yeah, Public Works. And I can't obviously speak to all of their reasoning, but I think the last meeting, it's Wolford and I and Chris, who's our city engineer, and yeah, I didn't see any indication from the city engineer that was something he would support. And I go at it with them a lot too. I'm still trying to get 2 more feet out of the asphalt and get rid of, these cul-de-sacs. So
but we,
I don't take everything they say as gospel.
but we just did it with the Hatfield property though.
Do you want to know why?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. The reason we did it with the Hatfield property is because they already had curb, gutter, and sidewalk there that was put in when the road was developed as a MAG project more than 20 years ago.
It was combination,
It was combination.
so there was no park strip.
Correct. There's no park strip. So they had a very good argument to say these lots are all already developed. There is pre-existing infrastructure. In looking at it from a rough proportionality of what is our impact on the city and what are you requiring from us, that
You back up, because they put the utilities just barely into the street on the Hatfield project. They just came in and put the sewer, the water, none of that was in there when the sidewalks were torn out and everything was done. So the Hatfield project is a brand newly developed, got new street, new curb. The reason is I know I drive it
correct.
every day, and they
The reason
went into the street and got the sewer, water.
Correct. But the frontage improvements were already completed, not the underground utility. There weren't laterals to lots because it hadn't been platted. 9th South is wider than the required street section, or the actually identified street section there. So we could not legally require them to dedicate more ground as part of the right-of-way, because the right-of-way was already wide enough, because the asphalt's too wide. It's wider than our current standard. So the long-term plan there is to relocate the curb and gutter into the asphalt to provide that 8-foot park strip when that road needs that work. Because the road is over wide, and the amount of right-of-way dedicated was already sufficient to meet the road cross-section, so we couldn't go and ask them to give us more property. So we compromised in that they were willing to pull the sidewalk back to the edge of their property line and provide whatever remaining area as a park strip, even though the sidewalk is already there. They were reconstruct it, and then in the future the city would come back and move that curb and gutter into the street to get to the 8-foot park strip. So that's why that's the short answer of why that is how it is.
And it was existing without a park strip.
Right.
So could they have just continued to have no park strip?
We were of the opinion that because those lots had not been subdivided, that when you do a subdivision, you have to bring the frontage improvements up to code. So we felt that they needed to do that and felt that that was a defensible position. But we didn't have any dream that we could make them give us more right-of-way when there was already enough right-of-way there based on our current engineering standards.
So
So
did you change a road cross-section? Did you create one for that?
no, we have a current non-conforming road cross-section that's already there on the ground. That road's already too wide in the asphalt. And so as we reconstruct that road, we will bring it into conformance.
I'm just trying to find a way that we could find a good compromise, and maybe you guys need to go back and figure it out. You know what I mean, between,
What about a 10-foot front setback?
what's that?
What about a 10-foot front setback?
I totally don't like that myself. Everyone's got their own opinion, because down down where we've got down behind Smith's, I mean, it's like, is there a 10-foot, park strip there?
There's an 8-foot park strip.
8 foot, I'm sorry.
Yeah, correct.
I always think of the curb and gutter that goes with it.
Yeah,
So it's,
2 feet of curb and gutter, yeah.
I'm showing my cards where I'm thinking of the land that's trying to develop, but I'm just trying to see if there's not some way, obviously we have a system in place to do a non-conforming road cross-section, and we have the ability to say this is a unique part of the project, or a unique part that we might be able to, I don't know if a variance or something else is like that. I think we have to be fair, and I've spoke to this before in these other meetings. You know, when people invest in a piece of property, you know, and that's what I was trying to do on the property just west of here, was invest in it to, based on the plat and the opportunities for development of lots. So I had the ability to take that piece of property, develop 3 nice lots, and also still have somewhat of an affordable, because when you're paying, you know, that much money for a piece of, I mean, I built my house just east of there, you know, and I remember being terrified when I paid for the lot. Now it's like, you put it on your credit card, right?
Right.
So I'd like to see some kind of way to compromise, because this is not like creating a boulevard. I mean, even the trail that goes in there, everyone may not be familiar with it, but it deadheads right there, you know, into the property. So, and they were talking about putting a trail down the other way going west, but it hits into people's backyards.
Right.
And so people have invested into the land because they buy a creekside lot. They're expecting to be able to incur that investment, and the public is not like coming back and saying, well, for the public good, we're going to, you know, not let you do this, and now your investment is less valued, but we're gonna offset that to you, and we're going to give you a certain percentage, you know, if you're gonna put, I can tell you, if any one person in here, if they were gonna say, we're gonna put a 12-foot, you know, pathway through your backyard right now, you would not be happy about it, you know what I mean? Any one of us, we would, this is basically someone's backyard. And so that's my big concern is that we have to, the corridor is there. I realize that Hobble Creek's been there. I've played on this creek for, you know, 60 years. I mean, we literally, don't tell the fishing game this, but we used to hunt deer just east of here. But the time is gone past when we can create this buffer and corridor down through Hobble Creek. And I just don't think that, like, holding ground for something like that in areas that they don't make sense. You can't get a pathway. Like, who's gonna walk 400, 300 feet up a path and then stop, turn around and walk back? I mean, it doesn't really, you know, it's not that much of a benefit. And it's obvious because the city hasn't come in and put these little, you know, east of, up in Hunter Valley and the other areas that we've had up in there. In fact, those were a problem, and they actually have fenced them off. So those are, I just think for the public good is a nice badge to wear, but I think we owe it to our, and we've talked about this before in these meetings, is we owe it to people that invest in property with a certain intention of how they're gonna get their investment out. So that's just my, you know, view on this thing. I think it's a good compromise, but I think if there's something, I mean, that whole street right there, we just redid that sidewalk. And, that's a combination. There's no planter strip, there's nothing. I mean, if there was ever a street that had, you know, something like that, then the city didn't do that there. So to me, it's kind of a contradicting stat, you know, to say, well, in these areas, it works for the city, so we're not gonna do the park strip. In the other areas, cause we can, we're gonna
Well,
force.
the hard thing here though is, regardless of coming to an agreement now, as it's currently written, and I'm trying really hard to, like, not let my colors show in terms of, like, I mean, I'm a designer. I'd love to design it. It's great. You come out with layouts, but currently legislatively as written, it doesn't work.
No. So to Ralph's point, nothing has changed in the land use regulations since the property was purchased. So no investment-backed expectations have been altered. The same development potential exists on the property today as it did when it was purchased. And my recommendation of creating a parkway there was kind of a quid pro quo for being able to have additional lots or smaller lots or other changes. But as it is, the requirement for the setback and the trail easement is the same requirement that people have been complying with for 20 plus years. So there's really no.
And the fact that we don't have all of it is not a reason to not try and get it. This is a long-term project that the city has the goal to be able to do that eventually. And as properties change and the opportunity comes up, then they put that easement in there because it wasn't put in, however many decades ago when something was built there. And that is a long-term goal and project of the
Right.
city.
And in this case, when the rest of the property develops, we would have a connection from 12th East to the next road to the east, so it actually would be not just a dead end. But Genevieve makes a good point. We are definitely paying today for lack of foresight in other areas, and I would not want to have a future me, a successor, look back and say, hey, why didn't you, protect this 1,200 or 1,400 feet? But when we're not talking about getting rid of the trail easement, but
But the trail easement wasn't there when I was doing the property west of it, which is only a few years ago. That's why I was concerned about when I was talking about investment, because the plat was approved, there was no easement in that original, and then what happened is it had expired by about 30 days, and when it came back, then everyone said, well, no, now you have to put a 20-foot easement. So I'm not
there's
sure.
actually not an easement on that property today in the final recorded plat, because the city determined that based on the code, that the amount of property that it impacted pushed it over a certain threshold, and we couldn't require it there. So actually, there is no trail easement to the
Oh, really?
to the west. No.
I'd make a suggestion. We've really appreciated the discussion. We've heard some ideas that we hadn't heard before. Wonder if it'd be possible, rather than doing a up or down vote, if we could continue this for a couple of weeks. Let us meet with staff again. I don't think we're gonna get what we want, but maybe we can do something better than what we would be otherwise, and then bring it back in a couple of weeks, maybe streamlined a little bit.
I think that's a good option, because we've had this same situation in the past months or so, and we've had an ability to, because we want to see both sides be successful. We appreciate all the hard work that staff does on all this. They're trying to watch out for the public good, and then we also have, at least that's my opinion, I think.
Yeah, I think it was already moving towards continuing the
Yeah.
item. It wasn't, I don't think we were planning on denying anything, because regardless, I think like you're saying, there's a way forward.
We want to have a good development. Like I say, we're trying to preserve trees, we're trying to do everything we can to accommodate topography and existing vegetation. There's got to be a way we can work through this. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Just last question, sorry, did you have a question?
Go ahead.
Okay. How does the update to the general plan, how would that factor into any of this conversation, Josh? Because I know that's in process.
Yeah, I see a future. I'm like Madame Trelawney. See a black dog. No, I don't see a black dog. But I see a future where we have a set of zoning and development tools that provide us more flexibility to respond to contexts and properties that are atypical, that are not, as Wilford mentioned, not rectilinear and don't yield well to an 80 by 100 foot lot. I don't know that I see a change to street standards. We've been having that conversation on another property up east in 2100 East, north of the new subdivision that's going in up there. And Public Works really has no no desire to facilitate a country lane or a smaller street. I'd love to see something like that, but I don't know that we're going to get to that point. But I do see the general plan saying we need to be provide the flexibility to respond to unique contexts, especially where it's providing infill and attainable housing, but probably also where we're trying to provide kind of estate housing, because we need that too. We need real nice houses for people that can afford them and want to be in Springville. We want those people too. So I do see a toolkit with a whole lot more tools in it and a lot more sizes of pegs and a lot more,
That's more of my question
flexibility.
going is in terms of the flexibility for these infill properties as they come forward, because it's going to happen more often now.
Has there been discussion of like an infill overlay or something that would specifically, relate to?
There definitely could be. An infill zone is really a Band-Aid on bad zoning, where you have kind of your R18 and R110 and R15 with these rigid standards. They must be this and they must be this. But if we overhaul the whole structure of the zoning, which is what I'm looking to do, you have less need for the code here's the chapter to do if all of the other chapters that are based on suburban zoning from 70 years ago don't work. That we don't want just a relief valve. We want the whole structure of the code to be able to reduce barriers to development and facilitate these type of things. So however that happens, that's my goal. My goal is as pie in the sky as I would like to see Wolford as a by right development be able to put a little cottage court in here next to a 15,000 square foot lot if he wanted to. But right now you can only build if you have 10,000 square feet. But wouldn't it be nice if someone that can't afford a quarter acre lot and a 6,000 square foot house could live in this neighborhood too? So all the way across the board, we're looking for opportunities to let our neighborhoods evolve and continue to change flexibly while maintaining the important parts of their character.
The language that it is right now is also very concerning to me, because it is vague, because it's just developments required to provide a trail easement. Even if it was only on one tiny part of it, then that would apply to the whole development. This language is not the way to do this. And so I'm definitely for a continuance to have more discussion on it, and on what can be done with the setbacks, while to enable more buildable area, but not compromising the 8-foot park strip. Because for me, that a cul-de-sac or a trail that ends is the same thing to me. and it's a place to walk my dogs. It's a place to, for my sister to walk, and it's much more pleasant and inviting when you have that 8-foot park strip than the areas that I've seen that have that, I don't even know if it's 3 foot, but it's like this teeny tiny one, and it just doesn't, invite you to walk on there and feel safe and comfortable. And I think that that is an important thing for the neighborhood to create that inviting world so that you have. I love seeing all kinds of different people walk up and down my street on Second East, and that's a big part of it. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Tyler, do you have any comments?
Not really. Fascinating discussion. Yeah, it's I'm kind of more probably in Ralph's camp with regards to my thought process on it. Like to see if there's a compromise or to make it happen without, totally losing out on public access and giving up on that, but also helping the petitioner reach his goals as well.
I agree. And
Well, we
I
don't-
have one more thing. I think your comments are really good, Genevieve, about the ways that neighborhoods work, but I also think that if we were gonna come in and take, 10 feet out of everybody's yard, or 8 feet, you know what I mean, and say we wanna build a community, there would be, not very many people would be happy about giving that much of their property up, but
Depends on how much property it is.
depends probably, if you're like me, how far my house is close to the street, right? Because I would have a problem with that too. As much as I love the parks and the other things, I'm just saying, I think that we have to keep in mind that that's what we're asking the future people that are buying this house, is we need you to buy 10 extra feet of property or whatever. In your purchase of a home, you're gonna have to buy extra land so that we can have a certain feel and we can walk around your neighborhoods and things like that. So it's a balance, because I love the neighborhoods too, but it's an investment for these people. So that's really what we're asking. We're telling people, you have a piece of land, we're gonna expect you to pay for 10 feet of land, we're gonna expect you to maintain that 8 feet, 10 feet to a curb, and we're gonna expect you to pay for that, and that's part of your, mortgage and everything else. And I think that's where we're running into a little bit of conflict with. I hear affordable housing all the time. People are telling me we want affordable housing, but then we have standards that are driving the cost. I mean, it's not gonna be borne by the developer, it's borne by my kids or your kids or other people that are trying to purchase this property. So that's what we're really saying when we do these park strips, or we're saying, you have to buy the land, you have to pay for it by the square foot, and now you have to, it's essentially a part of it, because that's what we want our community to look like. And people have the choice to buy or not to buy.
Yeah,
So-
That's an expected part of it. I mean, my lot, if you put a 20-foot easement on it, would go to 5 feet from my house. And, that's because it's a small lot. But I don't begrudge the 5 feet that I have, 5 or 6, I don't know which it is, between the sidewalk and the curb in that park strip. I consider that part of my yard. And I have trees there, and I have plans to, develop it and garden and whatnot, and that is a part of my property.
And something to be clear about, this isn't, that argument isn't necessarily applying here, because this isn't affordable or attainable housing.
Yeah.
This is,
It's not affordable.
these lots alone are gonna be a third to a quarter acre at the smallest, and
I understand
at that point,
Yeah.
you're talking $20,000 out of $500,000 or whatever they're gonna sell the lots at. So
I'm just saying that that's my general spiel about requiring the park strips, cause I'm not a big fan of them. Whether anywhere, you know what I mean, I just think but that's just my opinion. I mean, just like everybody else, they'll have their opinion, but I think that that we have to look at it that way, that's the way, what we're asking people to do, whether it's we're putting park strips, whether we're putting parks, whether we're putting wide streets, narrow streets, or we're asking them to buy and do, so, that's just my comment, so.
Well, I move to continue the item with the applicant and staff.
Yeah, are we all done? We have to have public comment or?
We did.
Did we?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's right, even
Yeah.
closer. Thank you.
You're the one that
I second the motion then.
As you
Okay, so-
discuss the motion, is there any specific guidance? It's always nice as we go back into this. You're kind of my back table as we negotiate. And if I know if there are any kind of like side rails to where I should negotiate, that helps me better define what may be an acceptable range of solutions. So if there is any
So,
additional guidance from what you've provided as to what elements you may be most amenable to in some type of negotiated agreement here, that would be helpful.
taking
But
into
if not,
account
it's fine.
what Public Works has said, like, I would think that, personally, I would think that the front setback could even be reduced even more, potentially, if that's really the concern, to make the buildable area larger. That being said, I would hope that staff would take into account that front-facing garages would not be allowed, if that were the case. If we're doing a 10-foot, setback in the front. And that's just taking into account what Public Works has said about reducing the park strip itself.
Yeah, I would say, like, there would need to be some discussion on, if it is a 10-foot setback from the front, then, the garage would have to be 20 feet setback, like it is in that one option, or, not be front-facing, that kind of a thing.
That said, like, I was just in Charleston and Boston and other parts of the country that they have a building setback with a parking right 10 feet away from the street, and
Yeah.
it was okay.
Charleston too.
So if that's the case, like, I think there's ways, but it's hard to regulate design at a city level to where it's gonna be pleasing, so.
Yeah.
For myself, I think we could do, sorry, I don't know if I'm not being heard, I didn't realize my mic was not there. So, hey, maybe nobody heard what I said. But what, I think that the opportunity, maybe we need to do some kind of a one-off kind of thing. I don't really have a problem with, obviously, I've stated how I feel about the park strips, I don't have a problem with all that, but I do think it's really difficult to apply it to the general everywhere, because we don't know what everywhere is going to be. I think there's a little inconsistency in applying standards around the city. It's difficult because when you modify an existing neighborhood, I noticed on Hatfields, they're taking the sidewalk and then they're jotting it out, but they're gonna eventually come back. I appreciate your explanation of why what they're gonna do to cut that sidewalk and put it back into the side, but, so I'd like to see some way, an ability, cause this is a unique piece of property, we have different places, and it's a value to the community to have a nice neighborhood with nice homes in it. That's what we want, okay? We want a wide range of different homes in a community, because then we have people that move into the community. That's where they establish their businesses, that's where they're going to. And anyway, that would be my input. If you were asking, I would say I'd like to see something, I think it's fine. I just think that maybe you don't apply it to the entire, you just say, okay, for this section, we're going to make an adjustment, just like we've done with Hatfields and other areas that are unique. We've got some places that are east of this that are, we've done that same thing.
And speaking to that, the existing street section that Wilford and, I'm sorry, I forget your name. Hall brought up, that the existing residential area that has 3-foot park strips, I do think, and Josh, you spoke to this as well, as it's important to be able to maintain that connection at the eastern side of the property to not dead end that for future development. If there was an opportunity to keep that and carry that existing street section through, I think that would be something that I would be open to, because it matches the existing street section that's in the development adjacent to it.
Yeah.
But it would also accomplish with what the city is trying to do of creating a through street.
Yeah.
You want me
Just-
to tell you what
the-
the problem is there?
Sure.
Right here. To the edge of the creek here, see, the edge of the creek here, to here is 150 feet. How are you gonna put a 50-foot and a 50-foot road, you're gonna have a 50-foot deep walk? I'm gonna work. Unless you put it along the creek.
That's something we,
If you wanna get everybody in the neighborhood all mad, you put a road right along here, and then see what these people come and say to you. Ask
Yeah.
Money. We asked Money about it, didn't we? What did he say? Absolutely not. If you wanna get everybody mad in that whole neighborhood, in that whole area, you go put a road right along that creek, right into those people's backyards across the creek. And you'll have a lot of people madder than hornets in here to talk to you. If I proposed that, if I brought that, and those people knew about that, they'd be in here like crazy.
Yeah.
It'd be a mad hornet's nest in here.
Plus, the houses east of that, none of them have a park. You know, none of them have a park strip. There is
Right.
just a combination. So you'd be transitioning from,
Well, the other,
I'm sorry for digressing you, but you do have a motion
Yeah.
on the table.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
thing is, this is a neighborhood, this is a neighborhood, this is a neighborhood. These neighborhoods don't connect anyway if you put a road there. The connection can be over here as easy as you can.
Thank you, Wilford. We need to have a vote on the motion. And so let's do a roll call. Tyler, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm good to continue.
Same. I'll move to continue. Well,
I move to continue.
I also move to continue.
Thank you for the long discussion.
All right. We now are moving on to our next legislative item.
Hopefully not too complicated of an item.
This is a recommendation to amend 11-3-402 definitions and adopt section 11-6-135 of Springville City Code concerning land use application expirations.
Slide, 'cause it was all the way back. And there's only one slide, so. Now it started.
start at the beginning.
I'm tired. Okay. This is coming to you from staff, from community development. The city has, several land use application types, from commercial site plan application to a subdivision application, could be a fence, well, maybe not a fence permit, but, the development applications, and people will apply and then lose steam, and we never see them again, and they sit. And where it's like, if they come back, are they still vested at that point? So we have nothing right now for applications to expire. So this is what we've kind of come up with to remedy that issue, and kind of the applicants that have become dust collectors, applications I should say, can be put away and we can start anew. But, And it'll establish clear standards for the expiration of land use application, allowing the city to, it allows the city to amend the land use code as needed without previously vesting the application. I can't talk now, guys. Basically, if I have a 2-year-old or 2-year-old application in the system and it doesn't have an expiration date, but the code has changed significantly or even slightly in that matter of time, they're vested from the time I accepted their application. So a lot of changes could have happened in that 2 years that, for the better, that we can't make that applicant do. So we really need to set a firm time to have them keep that going, to keep them within our codes, if that makes any sense. But
So, right now it's 2 years, or?
no, I was
there's
doing an
nothing?
example. If I have an application that's been in for 2 years,
But
sitting
there's,
there
right
without
now,
them
there's
making
no
anything
expiration.
towards it.
There's no expiration.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have no
That's,
expiration.
that's.
We
I
do
just
on
wanted to be clear.
approvals, we do on approvals,
Yeah,
so, but not to. that
Not on
wouldn't
an
be the-
application
on an
itself.
application itself.
Sure, so anyway, the long and short of this is basically, we've added a definition of what a land use application is. It means it's an application that is required by a municipality and submitted by a land use applicant to obtain a land use decision, and does not mean an application to enact, amend, or repeal a land use regulation. And then the timeframes we came up with, when I say we, actually, our city attorney wrote this mainly. I gave him a really brief paragraph of what I thought would be a good idea, and he gave me this back. But they'll have an initial 180 days or 6 months to meet all the land use, to get through the process, to get their approvals. At the end of that, if it can be deemed abandoned or forfeited, and any vesting at that point will terminate. If they need more time beyond that, and sometimes that happens, then they can get another 90-day extension through Josh. They have to propose in writing, fairly simple process. And then after that, it will expire. The last one captures all the 2-year-old applications I have in the system, basically, and gives them another 180 days till we'll say they're done. But that
And
is,
April 1st, that's when the city council, this will go before city council?
well, that's when it was written, so we can change that date. It was written to.
Does it have to be the date that it's approved by council, or we could?
I don't
keep
think
it
so.
April 1st?
I don't think so. I don't see why that would matter. Because we can retro dates back. Yeah, that's all I have on this one. Any questions?
Yeah, kind of clarify to me what the land use application does for a developer. Kind of give me the scenario how that works, because once the application's been approved, then it expires, right? So this one, tell me the difference between this, what this actually is. I apologize, I'm telling you I don't understand it, so.
They apply, they make their submittals, we give them comments back that they need to correct this, that, and then they take a 1.5 year hiatus and we don't hear from them.
So
So it will expire their application, and in the meantime, say we change a bunch of zoning
Yes.
laws.
I understand that part. I was just trying to say, so someone has a piece of property that they want to develop and put homes in it or something, right? Is that what I'm
Yeah,
understanding?
it would be a subdivision
So
application.
they would put a subdivision application, and that would apply in this case,
It's
right?
a land use application.
So land use application, so they've said we want the subdivision, and you say, nope, doesn't meet this, yes, does. We go through the whole process, and then they say, great, we've got it, everyone agrees, this is our application, and it should be, is it accepted, or is it just
Yeah,
presented?
we will not accept an application unless it's complete, so once we
Well, once
accept
it's
it.
completed,
But say they decide, maybe they change their mind, or they don't know what they wanna do, or maybe they just aren't gonna do it at all and they don't tell us. But I'm still obligated to hold on to that application.
totally hear you, you can't just spin out there forever.
So
I'm just-
if it's approved, if we go through everything and we say it's good and they say it's good and they get an approval either from the planning commission or through an administrative approval, then they have an approved site plan. And they have 180 days to make a submission either for a building permit or to record their subdivision and start doing horizontals, and then an additional 180-day extension under code before that approved site plan expires.
And that's what this is saying, is that it gives them 180 days.
This is saying an application before. This only applies to applications that are not approved.
Oh, okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
Yes.
I'm just trying to, from my point of view, when you can put a development in and you get it approved and then the economy changes, then all that money and time has gone wasted.
No,
if we
once it's
just-
approved, it's under.
I understand,
different
this is for
lifestyle.
unapproved.
Yes.
Yep.
I can understand, thank you, that helps me.
Yeah.
Any other questions for me?
Thank you very much. We will open a public hearing. If you want to come forward and state your name and address.
Dick Smith, 344 West, 300 North. Why was 180 chosen, 180 days?
6 months. It's a standard in most of our processes.
Is that just normal?
Most land use applications that I get are typically approved in 45 to 60 days, so 6 months is pretty generous.
Is that like a standard that's like statewide or federally,
Yes,
or, I mean, we
There's
just,
3 other cities I've researched that have the exact same.
cool, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, anybody else? Is there a reason we could not, like, extend it out a little bit longer? Sorry,
It's a public hearing,
I'm sorry, excuse me.
but you can request it.
Oh, I'm not seeing anybody else come forward, I moved to close the public hearing.
I'll
Sorry.
second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Now,
All right,
question.
now Ralph.
There you go. Yeah, I'm just curious if, like, it gives us more flexibility if is 6 months just to,
I would suggest, let's see how it works, and if it becomes a problem, we'll come back and extend that time, because I really feel like that we've already given them 6 months plus another 3, so there's 9 months. So if you can't get an application approved in 9 months, when our goal is to have them approved in 45 days. I'm just saying, this is coming from the city attorney. You can make a recommendation to increase that time if you want.
I'm just wondering what happens as it lays there? If nobody's doing anything on it, is it like in a queue? Is it keep coming up, or is it just lay in a folder and no one cares?
It's in a queue, yeah.
Laura just sees it and sees that.
I'm totally appreciating what you're doing, okay, so.
Yeah, that the day she just sees that there's an application that hasn't, if either that we haven't responded to, so hey, we're hitting our time, or if we've sent comments and it's in the applicant's court, she sees how many days it's been in the applicant's, and she keeps a.
And we're not gonna I'm not gonna say, oh, 6 months is over, you're expired. There'll be some pre-notifications to the applicant that, hey, do you want an extension, or do you wanna continue at all? So it just gives us that little safeguard.
Does it give you 180 days from the time of reapplication? Like if they were to respond, does it what's the 180 days from the initial application? So if they come back after 160 days and they say, oh, you're right, we need to make those changes, does the 180-day clock start again, or does it run out in 20 days?
A reapplication, it would start over.
But it is from the initial application.
But it's from the date that we accept the application as complete.
And say Ralph's situation is true, like, right now they're only allowed to come back and ask for 90 more days one time, currently as written.
And I initially had that as 180 days, and the city attorney changed it and reduced it. He felt that was too long, so.
Do they pay a fee to extend?
No,
not to extend.
That might be something you might consider if they require a fee to extend the 180 days, or is that just too much of a?
We've thought about that, and I think this fixes it because we have some, like out in Lakeside, that have been in the queue for 2.5 years, and we won't hear from them for 6 months. And we've essentially reviewed an application like 4 times and
Never.
have burned through the application fee multiple times over.
I
And-
think that's fair too, because you're spending time,
Right.
and that might be something you might consider. I don't know, maybe that's an additional you know what I mean, when you modify this, is I could just see going back and forth depending on how the economy switched. 180 days seems like a long time, but it may not be if the designer's trying to redo, if they're busy. You know, I'm speaking at it from a different point of
Right,
view.
and there's always gonna be that one special case, and we work with those and work around them and, you know, get them through the process as we can.
Okay.
But this really isn't like a problem, but it can be.
Yeah, we're not looking to try to beat people up. Just
But you have to make it fair. I mean,
true.
if
We can't be
one-
arbitrary.
If one person goes back and forth and we take it out a year and a half and we're saying, yeah, we really like this project, we
Right.
wanna do it.
Well, the
Agreed.
problem
And then
is-
the other one we don't like, and then we say, nope, you went the 180 days, you're out.
And this has happened recently and several times, but we have staff changes. Engineers, new engineers, different, 3 engineers on the same project, reviewing, all looking at it in a different light. So it just keeps it more efficient, consistent. Let's get everybody on the same page.
And it forces staff's hands to move quick,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, we're trying to be more efficient. I wanna get those projects off my desk and get more in.
You guys need every incentive you get, right? To move fast.
Well, I haven't gotten a fork in the road email yet, but yeah, we do need some incentives and some push sometimes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also, thank you to Laura. This was totally her initiative to get this done, so I really appreciate it.
Good job.
I love when, yep.
Any other discussion points? Or we,
I would like to see some kind of a fee applied if they have multiple applications. I don't know how you could do that, but I can see where you could burn through a lot of resources as it just continues to back and forth. And I don't know if that's possible or you'd like to look at doing that, but I mean, if this is what you feel like the best thing is from my point of view, I think it's great. I just think we don't really see what goes on the other side of the fence, okay?
We can take a look at that. Engineering actually has in their site, in their subdivision fee, that it's like 2 or 3 reviews is included in the initial fee, and then additional reviews, they have a fee for that. So that's something we could look at more broadly.
What is the initial fee to do that for a land use application? What does it cost?
Yeah, it depends on what it is.
So it's a percentage of the project?
No, it depends on the type of application. So like a site plan is around $1,200. Yeah. We have the computer do the math, and then subdivisions are based on a base fee plus a fee per lot.
What's a significant amount of money they've
Yeah,
had to invest,
yeah.
right? That's all I have.
Entertain a motion if there's no more discussion?
yeah, if we're all good with it, I'll move to recommend approval to amend 11-3-402 definitions and adopt section 11-6-135 expiration of land use applications of Springville City Code.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that was our last item on the agenda. Is there any other questions or anything for staff?
Thanks for being here tonight, all of you, and thanks to Jeremy for accommodating, being, Tyler.
Tyler.
I'm thinking of council member Smith's other appointee to the Landmarks Commission, which is Jeremy. Yes. Tyler, thank you for allowing, everybody, for the four of you, for being here so we could have this meeting. It was important to get through it.
Yeah, you bet.
We move that we adjourn?
Is there, do we know on our commissioner yet?
That would be a good question to your council representatives, since it's in their court.
Hey,
Council
Jake.
representatives,
Hey, Jake. Any movement on a new commissioner?
so it hasn't been approved by the council yet, but we're moving forward, that's great.
Good.
All right, we have a motion. We have a motion to adjourn.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Thanks,
right.
Tyler.
We
Yeah,
need
you
to
bet. Thanks
wait for signatures.